Whither we are headed and why? Why the senseless rush, this mad pursuit, this frantic competition, this pace that kills? Why do we drive ourselves as we do in our furious race to conquer outer space? Are we not perhaps forgetting inner space? Shall we find the true meaning of life by fleeing from it? Consider how we live our lives today. Everything is run, run, run. We bolt our breakfast. We scan the headlines. We race to the office. The full schedule and the split second. These are our gauges of success. We drive ourselves from morn to night. We have forgotten the meaning of the word relaxation. What has become of the old-fashioned ways, the simple pleasures of the past? Who can forget, for example, the old-fashioned band concert at twilight on the village green? The joy, the serenity of just sitting and listening. This is lost to us. And this we should strive to recapture, a simple, innocent pleasure. And so I say, dear friends, relax, slow down, take it easy. What's your hurry? What indeed, friends, is your hurry? Raise your hand if you know what that's from. That's right, the three of you. That is from an Andy Griffith episode entitled The Sermon for Today. I bet most of you can probably picture the scene now. Right there at the end, Opie has been catching a bug in his clenched fist, and Gomer and Barney are trying to fight to stay awake. And then after it's all over, they all come out to greet the preacher. And Barney says, "Oh, that's one subject you just can't talk enough about, sin." And Andy turns to Barney and says, "It wasn't about sin." But wasn't it though? You know, I'm a little nervous to begin a sermon on this topic with the word sin because we tend to have compartmentalized ways of thinking about these big words like sin and salvation. You know, in the New Testament, just flip through the Gospel of Luke, for example. The word salvation is so much more than going to heaven when you die. For salvation to come to your house means the poor finally get paid. The oppressed finally get justice. The wronged get righted. The perpetrator repents and then gets forgiveness. The Jew and the Samaritan sit down with Gentiles at the same table. In the kingdom of heaven, it's bigger than we think. The word sin is similar. We tend to think of sin as breaking a rule or contradicting a verse, and then it requires a short prayer of contrition or coming down the aisle on Sunday. And normally we'll ask the question, did you think that was a sin? But sin in Scripture can also refer to this deep, larger reality that we swim in all the time. Things don't work the way they're supposed to. Society doesn't look out for people the way we're supposed to. I'm not everything my wife needs me to be. Not everything my kids deserve in a father. Not everything my boss ought to get from an employee. Sin can refer to the brokenness in the world, the less than that we all sense within ourselves when we look in the mirror and when we see out in the world, and all the distractions that keep us from what God truly has in store for us. May not be violating some rule, but it's certainly not what we expect to be true when God makes all things right. And so this morning, with that larger sense in front of us, I want to talk about the sin of distraction. The way in which we as individuals, as a society, as a culture, habitually get in the way of God. I want you to repeat after me if you know the ending. I feel the need for speed. And we do, don't we? I mean, we got to get the kids up, bathed, fed, dressed, and out the door. We got to do the same for ourselves. Get gas, fight traffic, get to work. Get that report done that we've been working on, and maybe we'll get it done. We're supposed to get it done before lunch. We pick up our dry cleaning. We call AT&T about the mistake on our bill during lunch. Then we fight with our spouse about which one of us is going to pick up the kids. And then there's the ball games and the karate and the ball games and theater and the ball games and ballet and the ball games and robotics and the ball games and piano lessons, and did I mention the ball games? And there's just so much to do. What about the homework? What about the project that we're doing on the side in hopes that our boss will promote us next year? That lawn isn't going to mow itself. I haven't even checked my emails. And after stuffing food down my mouth, the kids are all in bed. You and I, we finally get some time for ourselves, and then she wants to talk. And suddenly you feel exhausted, and it's lights out. You know, we weren't built for this. Rich Viotis puts it this way: our souls were not created for the kind of speed to which we have grown accustomed. Our lives can easily take us to the brink of burnout. The pace we live at is often destructive. The lack of margin is debilitating. We are worn out. And thus we are a people who are out of rhythm, a people with too much to do and not enough time to do it. And in all of this, the problem before us is not just the frenetic pace we live at, but what gets pushed out from our lives as a result, and that is life with God. James Comer puts it bluntly: I'm so sorry. I don't know how to soften the blow. There is simply no way to follow Jesus without unhurrying your life. Do you know why? Because hurry is not just something that happens to be alongside for the ride. Hurry is the enemy of the spiritual life. It doesn't just stand in the way, it actively fights against you. Dallas Willard said that Christians must get involved in the ruthless elimination of hurry. And it's not just in the warp and woof of the normal day-to-day of our lives, it's in our religion too. We think that God calls us to do one more, reach one more, teach one more mission trip, one more door to knock, one more study to do. We tell ourselves that God's calling us to run fast to greater territories. But I want to make it clear, even if He does, first, He calls us to lie down in green pastures. But we don't know how to do that. We're just so distracted. The photographer, Eric Pickersgill, took some candid shots of people. He's sitting in a booth, and he sees people eating at the booth next to him, and he's taking pictures, and then it dawns on him. They look so distracted. The family in the booth next to him never even talked to each other the entire meal. The dad had his nose in his food, the kids on their phones, the mother staring out the window, together, and yet so disconnected. And then he had an idea. What if, he said to himself, what if I photoshopped out the smartphones and the digital devices from the portraits to show our addiction? To put it another way, to highlight the sin of distraction. Take your average American who looks at a screen 8.5 hours a day. Not only do our screens become distractions, but while staring at them, our kids become distractions to us. We're addicted to our distractions, and they, the people behind it, like it that way. Did you know that if you've been on Facebook for 6 months or more, the algorithms know what you like and who you think you are better than your spouse of 20 years? And not only do they know what you want, they intentionally put things in front of your eyes that they know you hate. If you ever wonder when you're scrolling, you're thinking, why are there so many people who believe such dumb things? The algorithms put that in front of you because riling you up keeps your attention. And what does your social media scroll bring to your awareness? Everything from political strife halfway around the world, to professional sports drafts that are sure to disappoint, to Supreme Court decisions in D.C., to the aftermath of a hurricane in Honduras. And it makes us totally aware of things outside of our control. And we become numb and immune to the things that are within our control. Like the emotional pain that our spouse has been trying to communicate to us, or even the names of the people who live next door. Neil Postman wrote a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death, and he says in that book, we know everything about that which we can do nothing about, and almost nothing about that which we can do everything about. Numb, oblivious, distracted. And in this, we are falling short of the glory of God. You remember the scene. Mary and Martha are about to have a dinner guest. Not just any dinner guest, the Son of God. And Martha is busy. Of course she's busy. Wouldn't you be? You're about to put on a feast fit for a king. The doorbell rings. Martha says what I know we in our house have said so many times when we know somebody's coming over and we are shoving all the toys and the clothes into a side room and bolting the door shut. And what do we say when the doorbell rings? We're not ready. Martha keeps working. So much to do. But Mary sits at Jesus' feet and listens to him talk. Martha is having none of it. She comes in, she says, Master, don't you care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her to help me. Oh, we've sung those words so many times. There is much to do. There's work on every hand. Is Nathan really going to preach against the importance of work or serving at this point? No. No, because Jesus isn't opposed to work or serving. On another occasion, Jesus said, my Father is always working and I too am working. Jesus said, I didn't come to be served, but to serve. The problem is the time. Jesus looks at her and says, Martha, Martha, you know you're in trouble when your mama or daddy says your name twice. Or so you might think. I don't think this is Jesus saying that she is doing the kind of thing that makes your parents call your name twice. Have you noticed that in the Gospels, when Jesus says something twice, there's weeping behind it? Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how long I've wanted to gather your children together. Like a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you weren't willing. It's not so much the words of anger as the words of disappointment that you don't get this point. In the Old Testament, when David finds out his son has died, he says, "Oh, Absalom, Absalom, oh, how I wish I could take your place." He's not upset with her. He identifies a sad problem with her. Jesus looks at Martha and says, "You are anxious, you are worried, you are upset about many things." Doesn't that just sum up your life right now? Worried and anxious about many things. The most common anxiety right now is generalized anxiety disorder. That means we aren't worried about some one thing. We're anxious about many things. And what does she do when she gets anxious? She finds something to do to fill up her time, her hands, her mind. Up in verse 40, before Martha asked Jesus to send Mary into the kitchen to help, Luke says, but Martha was distracted with much serving. In the Middle Ages, this story was used to get people to leave their normal secular jobs and to go become monks and nuns. And the line went like this: leave the secular life and join the life of contemplation. But that's precisely not what the point of this lesson is. Because Martha isn't distracted with secular work that's keeping her from serving Jesus. She's distracted with serving Jesus. Do you see that? That's what makes this story so interesting. It's addressed to those of us who constantly put serving Jesus first. Think about that. Luke doesn't think of this as some neurotic, obsessive, compulsive problem in Martha. The Greek here really suggests that there is much that needs to be done when you're entertaining a house guest. And Martha's doing what needs to be done when you entertain a house guest. Have you ever seen the 4-quadrant chart that asks you to put things into one of 4 categories? Urgent and important. Urgent but not important. Not urgent but important. Not urgent and not important. We assume that evil is doing the opposite of what God says. But then we read the temptations of Jesus, and we learn that evil can be doing precisely what God says, but not with God's timing. We assume that obedience means doing all the right things. But then we learn that obedience is doing the one thing that we're supposed to be doing at the right time. Jesus wants Martha to see that when you have the opportunity to be with Jesus, there are many good things, maybe urgent things, maybe important things. But in those moments, verse 42, only one thing is necessary. Tim Keller has a very interesting take on this passage that I had never seen before. And I propose it as a what if. Do you realize we have a similar reference to the same people in John chapter 12? There's a dinner being put on at the home of Lazarus and Martha and Mary. And Jesus is there with his disciples. And during the dinner, Mary comes in and breaks a very expensive jar of perfume over his feet. And the disciples don't get it. One of them even says, don't you think we could have used this to go help the poor? And Jesus says, leave her alone. She has anointed me for my burial. Here's the take, the what if. Do you think it's possible that at this very moment, Mary is the only other person on earth besides Jesus that realizes he's about to die? And could it be because in Luke's gospel, beginning in chapter 8, Jesus over and over again says, hear me, hear me, hear me, hear me. He even says to the apostles, I'm going to die. Hear me when I say this. Is it possible that everyone around him is doing so much for Jesus that they weren't listening to Jesus? But the only one in the room who does know what Jesus has to say is the one who is willing to sit at his feet and listen to him. A man named Kosuke Koyama wrote a book with a fabulous title, 3 Mile an Hour God. Do you know the average speed at which we walk is 3 miles an hour? In the Gospels, Jesus walks everywhere. And as he walks, he touches people. He pours out his heart in love as he heals and he teaches and he serves. This is how real relationships work. This is the opposite of fake friends and meaningless likes in a socially fabricated world with endless reels that go hundreds of miles an hour. This is real friendship and true love that takes place at the speed of your daily walk. We're so busy running ahead of God when he really wants us to walk with him. And so here's the call. Maybe some of us need to hurry up and slow down. Maybe you know that the Christian tradition has several disciplines to help us waste time with God, so to speak. Maybe you've heard of disciplines like solitude and silence, or stillness and Sabbath. Raise your hand if you've ever just wanted to get away from it all. Anybody? Your spouse is looking at you a little weird. Say, well, I mean with you too, honey. Just want to get away from it all. Katie and I have gone on an Italian vacation. Oh, we still talk about it. It was glorious. Some of you hike the Rockies, or you go fly fishing in Wyoming. Some of you just love camping. You jump in the car, you find some out-of-the-way village, and you go antiquing. But all the things I just mentioned, good in themselves, miss the point of what I'm really trying to get at. All of these things take you away from your normal 9 to 5, but they don't necessarily help you get away from yourself. It's still your vacation, after all. You know, when life at home with 3 small children feels like chaos, so you go to your bedroom for 5 minutes to recharge, that's perfectly normal, but it's not what we're talking about. If I were to encourage you to get away for spiritual growth, I mean something more, something different than finding time to unwind, finding time for yourself. I'm talking about ways that help you not unplug from others to enjoy yourself. I'm talking about spiritual habits that help you plug into God so you can enjoy his presence and forget yourself. Did you ever notice that in the Sermon on the Mount, before Jesus tells us what to pray, he tells us where to pray? Matthew chapter 6, Jesus says, when you pray, go into your room, shut the door, pray to your Father who's in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Now, when I first hear that, I can't help but think of my modern house, can't you? And you think of your bedroom. Of course you do. The problem is that's not at all what he's talking about. He's not talking about the place in your comfortable house where you spend so much of your life. In the first century, most of your life was done outside. What you tended to have, the inner room that Jesus is talking about, was something like a huge pantry, where you would keep all your foodstuffs. It's not where you go to relax. Instead, it's an odd place to go. And there's nothing in it like an Xbox or a PlayStation or a telephone or a comfortable bed. Go into the inner room and close the door would be like sitting in your pantry where you keep your foodstuffs and you hide in the closet. And it's unnatural. And you're not in there waiting for someone to find you in a game of hide and seek. The reason is because it needs to feel uncomfortable. The reason is not because it needs to feel uncomfortable, but because it needs to be non-distracting. That's what I was trying to get at. Have you heard about the parent who sent their child to their bedroom for punishment? And they said, go to your room, but don't watch TV, don't play Xbox, don't play PlayStation. You know what, on second thought, go to my room, right? The key is to find an undistracting place. In the very first chapter of Mark, Jesus is described this way. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and he went to a desolate, solitary place where he prayed. The word there is quiet, lonely, deserted, a place free of distraction. And this wasn't unusual for him. Luke says it was his habit. He often withdrew, Luke 5 and verse 16, he often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Remember that Garden of Gethsemane scene? Both Luke and John tell us why Judas knew where to go to get Jesus. Because he often met with his disciples in the deserted, solitary place of the garden to pray. Where is your secret place? It doesn't have to be a nice study built under the side of your house. Jesus had many secret places that he would go to throughout his life. But what's your habit of not getting away to relax and unwind, but of leaning into God, away from the distractions that war for your soul's attention? Maybe it's your morning run. Maybe it's those first 10 minutes of the day. Can I encourage you as we end this short series on what it means to be with Jesus, to make it your ambition to lead a quiet life? Can I encourage you to hurry up and slow down? Can I encourage you to practice stillness, that you can deny the God of distraction? Waste time with God is a way of saying, the time isn't mine, so little of it to get my things done. The time is fighting for my attention, and I want it all to belong to God. And if you give God your time, you'll find him give it back to you in greater measure. For when we spend time with God, our time with others, and even with ourselves, becomes richer.
Recently, Nathan has asked several of our elders to offer brief reflections on topics related to his sermons. And when he asked me for some thoughts on distraction, I was immediately reminded of an agape group conversation led by Jason White a couple of weeks ago, in which one of the women in the group observed the challenges of everyday life and the constant call to add more things, to keep saying yes to all the things, all the opportunities, all the goings and doings that keep our lives busy. Her observation struck me so deeply that I've been reflecting on it for a couple of weeks now, because it's the challenge of our lives today, if you think about it. More, to have more, to do more, to get more. As she said in our group, it gets hard to say no. And there's the issue. In the quest for more, for faster, we turned our lives and our choices over to things that promise to make it easier, but actually just make us feel even more overwhelmed. You may recognize this feeling. It feels to me as though our lives, our behaviors, our choices even have been hacked in a way. We make our lives faster, we make them more automated, and before long, all we're doing is this. Just scrolling through from one distraction to another, mindlessly sleepwalking through our lives. Some of us live a sense of autopilot day after day. And today, Nathan will ask us what it means or might mean to slow down. To stop just saying yes to whatever distraction is put in front of us. And to more actively choose the things that we are bringing into our lives so that we are saying an active yes to the Lord and to his life, and no to those things that would distract us. This is a call to worship, but I will tell you that there are many calls to worship. This call to worship is only the first one you will hear this week. As you go from this assembly, you will be called to worship at the pantheon of altars the world offers us. Called to worship the famous or the entertaining, to worship various governments or so-called leaders of the world, to worship politics and power, to worship money and achievement, to worship the lurid images that keep us from intimacy. But here at the dawn of the week, before all of these others may ring out, we gather together to hear the clarion call to worship Jesus Christ as Lord. The call to sit at his feet undistracted. The call to put away worldly amusements and concerns. The call to follow in his steps, to learn from him, to praise him, the meek and lowly one. And in that doing, we guard ourselves against all the other things, the more, the faster, the louder, the lurid, the appeal of all the world's temptations, to lay aside all those things and to claim the one necessary thing, which is Christ our Lord.
Thank you for joining us. I hope you've been encouraged. I hope you've been enriched. And if you have any questions, any thoughts, any comments, reach out to us at prayers@wschurch.net. God bless you. Tune in next week.